Hi there and welcome back. In the last video we began to lay out the CSS for our second project in our Introduction to Dreamweaver series. And what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go ahead and format this top nav bar right here. So let's go ahead and continue. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and we'll come back into our design. And I want to come back in here to code view and I want to look at the HTML source code. And again, what we're looking at here is the top nav div. And I want to point out several things to you here. First are the leveling or the order that the elements appear in here. We have a div called top nav, and inside of that top nav div we have a UL, and inside of the UL we have a number of LIs, and each LI has an anchor tag inside of it. So sort of the leveling here is top nav, UL, LI, A. And each one of these different levels is going to play a role in formatting that top navigation bar. So let's go ahead and come back into our CSS style sheet. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and you'll see containers here. And there's the top nav container. But I'm going to scroll down just a little bit further and you're going to see a section here called navigation extras. I'm going to go ahead and place my top nav code in that section right there to sort of separate my container styling from the actual navigation styling. Now each one of these styles you need to specify that it's applied to the elements that are in the top nav div. So each one of the styles is going to be prefaced by the top nav ID. And again, we're going to format the UL, the unordered list. We're going to format the individual list items, and then we're going to format the individual anchors within the list items that are inside of the UL. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is top nav UL, and then I'll do an opening bracket, and I'm just going to hit enter because I'm going to have a number of styles here. And the first thing I need to do is I need to specify that this unordered list should span the entire width of the design. So the first property that I'm going to go ahead and do is width 100%. Width 100%. So I want, again, that UL to span the entire area. I also want to remove any left-hand margin or padding. So I'm going to go ahead and do padding left 0 and margin left 0. And later I'm going to show you why we do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and just hit enter, and I'm going to close that style off and save this, and let's take a look in design view, and you shouldn't see any differences in this at this point. But the next thing that I want to go ahead and do is I want to set the background color to that orange color, and it's going to be that orange color right there. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that and come back into the code for my style sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and say background dash color is going to be that same dark orange color, that same B6 4A23. And again, we'll close that with a semicolon, and I'm going to go ahead and save that and go into design view, and now you'll see that that's filled in with that orange color right there. You're also going to see that we have a little bit of white space right there. We're going to go ahead and take care of that later because there shouldn't be any white space separating the navigation bar from the title area. But again, we're going to deal with that in just a little bit. So coming back in here and coming back into code view, the next thing that I need to go ahead and do is I need to change the orientation of these individual list items. By default, LIs are formatted as block level elements. Again, LIs are formatted as block level elements. And what that basically means is that they stack on top of each other. The opposite of a block level element are elements that are displayed inline. And that means that they line up next to each other in a line. An example of that would be the IMG tag, whereas images naturally stack left to right because they're inline elements. List items naturally are block level elements, so they're stacked on top of one another. But you can always change that. You do that simply by going into the code view and scrolling on down here and finding our navigation elements. Whoops, I went a little bit too far, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and create another style because, again, this is formatting the UL that's inside of TopNav. Now what we want to do is we want to affect the list items. Whoops, got to make sure I spell that correctly. So we want to do TopNav ULLI. TopNav ULLI. And the only property value statement that we're going to have to do here is not float, but display. We want to do display inline. Display inline. And again, that's going to allow those to line up next to each other as opposed to being stacked on top of each other. So I'm going to go ahead and come back in here to Design View, and now you can see that those are lined up just like that in line. The unfortunate part about this is that they're now also centered in that div. And the reason why they're centered in the divs is we had to use that text align center property on the body tag for the for Internet Explorer. So we actually need to correct that to say that these elements should be aligned over to the left. So let's go ahead and change that now. So now I'm going to go ahead and come back in here to Code View for my styles. And right now we have two styles here. We have the UL style and the LI style here. And the property value statement that you're going to need to align those to the left is simply text align left. Now, where should you put that? Should you put it on the UL or should you put it on the LI? The answer is simple. If you look at what's going on here, it isn't the individual LI items that are centered. It's the contents of the UL container that are centered. The individual list items are just contained inside of that. So I'm going to come back into my code view, and I would place that text align property on the container, the UL. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter there, and I'm going to do text align left. And that's not too bad of a problem to figure out because you've only got a couple of options here at this point, the UL or the LI. And if you were to put it on the LI, nothing would happen, and you'd know to put it on the UL. And now when I come back in here to Design View, you can see those elements are now aligned over to the left. Now, the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and create the actual button itself. You can see the links are there, and the text is there, but they aren't forming buttons themselves. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to format the A tag that's inside of the LI. So I'm again going to come back in here to Code View, and I'm going to click to the right of that and just hit enter a couple more times, and I'm going to do TopNav ULLIA. And I'm going to do an opening bracket and hit enter. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put some padding around those items. And what this is going to do is it's going to form the shape of the button. You can see the individual buttons are a different size. About takes up a different amount of space than reservations does. So I'm not specifying the width and the height of the individual buttons. What I'm doing is I'm specifying the space around the button. So I'm going to go ahead here and minimize that. And here I am again in my A tag. And I'm going to go ahead and do padding. And I just need a couple of different values here. One for top and bottom, and one for left and right. And I'm just going to start off with 10 pixels and 25 pixels. And that'll give me 10 pixels top and bottom, and 25 pixels left and right. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter there, and then I'm going to go ahead and close off my style. Save that. Let's see where that brings us to. I'm going to come in here to design view, and you're going to see that we have indeed some space left and right on it, but we don't have some space top and bottom. We need to do one other item to get the spacing top and bottom to appear for us. So here I am in my design. I'm going to go back into code view, and I'm in my style sheet. And don't worry about the reason right now. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. What I need to do is I need to put a couple of float statements in here. I need a float statement on the UL and a float statement on the A. And if I go ahead and apply float left to the A and save that, and then look at this in design, you'll see I can now see the top and the bottom spacing on that. But what was wiped out there was the background color. In order to have the background color appear, I again need to go into code view, and I need to apply the float left onto the UL. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now when we come in here to design, you'll see we have the top and the bottom, as well as the left and the right padding, and the color is filled in. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and actually format the text that's inside of these items right here. So I'm going to go ahead and again come back in here to code view, and I'm going to do this in my anchor tag. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do, let's look at our sample before we continue here. You can see the font color is different. It's white. You can see that the font itself is different. It's not Arial, it's actually Georgia, and the font is also a little bit larger and bold than our example is showing right here. So let's go ahead and set out those styles. And again, I'm in the A tag style right here. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is set the color. And I'm going to set the color to being white. I'm going to go ahead and specify a different font family for that because I don't want it to be Arial. I want it to be Georgia. So I'm going to go ahead and select that as my font. I'm going to go ahead and increase the font size a little bit to 14 pixels so it stands out a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and make these bold. So I'm going to do font weight bold. And we'll go ahead and save that. And I'm going to go back into design view, and now you can see those links that are right there. So it looks much more like our sample. Now, some browsers are going to also apply an underline underneath these links. And that's fairly common to have happen. So to make sure that we never get underlines underneath here, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to come back in here to code view. I'm going to add one more item, text decoration. And I'm going to say none for the value. So text decoration none, and that just completely eliminates any possibility of us getting underlines on this. Now, the next thing that I want to go ahead and do is get rid of that white line there that's separating my banner right here from my top nav. And I'm going to go ahead and come back in here to code view. And this doesn't actually affect the UL, the LI, or the A. Or I should say the UL, the LI, or the A don't affect that top spacing at all. That's a function of the div itself, not anything that's contained inside of the div. So we're not going to do anything to these styles here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up, and here are my container divs, and there's my top nav div. And again, the order that you put these in doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and do margin top -3 pixels. And I'm just going to save that and go back into design view, and you should see that negative top margin just pulled that up to eliminate that extra white space. So now we have a top navigation bar that looks much more like our sample. The last thing that we need to go ahead and do is we need to go ahead and apply this hover effect right here so that we get a transition. So I'm going to go ahead and again minimize that, and I'm going to come back into code view, and I'm looking at my styles right now. I'm going to scroll back down under navigation extras, or navigation extras. And I need to create a new style here because I don't want this to affect the default way that those links are going to appear. I only want this to change when there's a hover effect. So the style that I'm going to go ahead and create is again specific to the top nav div, and I'm looking inside of the UL for any LIs that contain A tags, but I'm going to do a colon and hover, and that specifies the hover effect, or when you hover over it with a mouse. And I'm going to do an opening bracket there, and I'm going to go ahead and specify the background color for the hover. And again, you could use the color picker here if you wanted to. I actually know what color I want to make it, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in 6F3737. 6F3737. And then I'm going to go ahead and close that style off and save it. And let's go ahead and look and see what we've got in design view here. And again, I'm in live view right now, or you could preview this in a browser window. When I hover over it, you're going to see I get a changing color for the box. There's one other style I want to put in for older browsers, and that's to make sure that the font color does not change when I hover over. And again, this is for older browsers. I'm going to come in here to code view again for my styles and scroll down until I come to my navigation extras. And again, there's that hover effect right there. I just want to go ahead and add the additional style color white, or triple F. And that's going to make sure that the text color doesn't change when we hover over it in a mouse if our visitor is using an older browser. So that's all we needed to do to go ahead and create this layout right here. Now, the sub banner that's underneath it is already formatted. It's just that image banner that we have right here. And then we come down here to our content area, our sub banner, and then our footer. And again, the sub banner that's right down here is also formatted. We don't need to do anything to that. So the next two items that we need to format are the content area and some styles for the content itself, as well as the footer div. And that's what we're going to go ahead and do in the next video.